Hi everyone, I'm going to share a story about something that recently happened to me in my own family with regards to a loved one who's passed away that absolutely validates our loved ones in spirit and how they are still very much a part of our lives. I'll share that story with you in just a moment. So as some of you know, one of my great aunts passed away about, I would say 4 months ago in July. She passed away from some sort of a weird respiratory infection that kind of came on all of a sudden. And then she was here 1 minute and then she was gone a week later. We really miss her and we really love her. So recently I had a most peculiar dream. And in the dream I was being visited by my grandfather and my aunt who passed away. She wanted to tell me something that I couldn't possibly know that would prove to my cousin, her daughter, and her children that she was still around. In the dream, she mentioned two names. She mentioned a woman by the name of Hilda, and then she mentioned another woman by the name of Glenda. And she said that Hilda was her foster mother and to ask my cousin about this woman. And I was like, well, that was an interesting dream. I'm like, well, I've got to share this with my cousin. I want to make sure that I pass along the message. I think I'm starting to get used to waking up early because of the strangest dreams that I seem to be having. But anyways, so I call my cousin and I ask her first thing in the morning, right? And she's like, what are you doing awake? And I'm like, well, your mom just stopped by. I believe your mom just stopped by and paid me a visit. And she mentioned a few interesting things. She told me to ask you or to tell you about a woman that she considered to be her foster mother called Hilda and another woman called Glenda. And she said to mention these names to you because it's something that I couldn't possibly know about and that this would prove to you that she was still with us. So my cousin was like, okay, well, I don't remember anyone by the name of Hilda, and I don't remember, anyone by the name of Glenda. And I told her, I said, yeah, I don't, those names don't ring a bell to me at all either because I don't ever remember the family talking about, anyone with those names. And I grew up from a predominantly Hispanic family, and we grew up in an area that was predominantly Hispanic. So those names are not very common names in our culture. So I tell my cousin, I'm like, well, we know that she spent most of her time around our Aunt Terry, which was our great aunt. Do you remember anyone else that maybe she spent time around? Or she says, no, she's never remembered. She doesn't remember the name. She's like, well, maybe it's a person that she worked with or a coworker. And I said, no, I don't think so. I think she was pretty insistent that this was like a foster mother to her, like another mom to her. So she specifically named her Hilda and then another woman named Glenda. So she's like, okay, well, I don't know. I said, well, ask our Aunt Virgie, which is another aunt, which is my Aunt Melba's sister. Ask her and see if she remembers anything or she knew anything about someone with that name. So she texts me later on in the evening and she says, well, our aunt said that she recognized the name, but she didn't remember who it was, but it sounded very familiar to her. So I was like, okay, now I'm really intrigued because this might actually be a real person. So then I asked my mom, and I called my mom and I said, Mom, do you remember anyone by the name of Hilda or anyone by the name of Glenda that used to spend their time around Thea Melba whenever she was younger? And my mom was like, no, I don't think so. There was a woman named Ophelia. And I was like, no, not Ophelia. Hilda and Glenda. And the only Glenda that I know of is Glenda from the Wizard of Oz. And Hilda's a really different kind of name. No, that's not it. Not Ophelia. It's, either Hilda or Glenda. She says, no, I don't think so. And do you ever remember a woman that spent time around Tia Melba when she was younger and when she was around Tia Terry? And then at that point, my mom was like, oh, yes, I remember her now. And I was like, okay. She says, yeah, Hilda, yeah, I remember Hilda. It's funny because my mom has the worst memory, so she can't even remember what she had for breakfast. So for her to remember something from back in the 50s and 60s, I was like, okay, who's Hilda? She's like, no, she's I remember. Our family used to live in a particular area of town, and they were it's this whole little street block. And so there was a woman that lived across the street from our grandmother, and there was an apartment complex on the corner block. And that apartment complex, there's a woman who lived there. Her name was Hilda. And she said that the woman had two daughters, and they remember those daughters because they were all very white complected. They didn't look Hispanic at all. They were very, very light colored, light complected. She believes they were from Spain. And the husband's name, well, they used to call him Güero, which is like a nickname in Spanish for like light skin or white skin. She said they all had beautiful, blue eyes, and they were very light colored. And the girls, her daughters, were very light complected. So the mom's name was Hilda, and one of the daughters' name was Linda. And I said, oh, okay. So she says that my Aunt Melba, who passed away, used to spend time over there with my Aunt Terry, and they were always visiting, Glinda and her daughters, or the daughters and Hilda would visit my Aunt Terry. And so there was that visitation that was happening back and forth for a period of time. So this woman actually existed. Her name was Hilda, and she even gave me her last name. She says her name was Hilda Mata. I have to, confirm that these people existed. So I began looking online. I was trying to look at the historical records, and because they live in an apartment complex, their names weren't going to be tied to the apartments because they lived in them, they didn't own them. I asked my mom which part of the street that they live on, because I remember that street because we lived very close to that, but that was back in the late 90s. And she says they lived across the street from where we did, in that open lot. I'm like, the open lot? She's like, yeah. I'm like, the open lot where the tree was at? And she says, yes. And I'm like, well, that's weird. I said, I remember when I was growing up, I always just thought that was an open field. This was massive, massive oak tree in the middle of the field. But I never thought anything was there. And she's like, yeah, there was apartments there. There was an apartment complex that was there, and it was torn down back in the 70s, and they just never built anything there after that. So I was like, okay. So I went looking. I couldn't find anything online. So I thought, well, let me ask my other aunt, because I want to make sure that what my mom is telling me is accurate. So I reached out to my other aunt, my mom's sister, and asked her about it. She says, yes, she remembers the lady. She remembers the daughters, and she remembers the husband, because they never knew the husband's name because they only called him Güero. But it was just so interesting. And I told my cousin, I'm like, oh my God, this woman actually existed. There was a woman named Hilda and she had a daughter named Linda, not Glinda. Though I'm thinking maybe that was my fault. Maybe I didn't hear it correctly, or that's what I thought I heard in my dream. But these people actually existed back in the 60s and 70s, and they knew my aunt, and this was way before I was born, so I wouldn't have known I actually didn't even know that there was an apartment complex across the street where we used to live at. So it's just so interesting that there's so much history, and she gave me some information that I couldn't possibly know. And when I found out, I was completely shocked, because I was like, oh my God. And to be on the other side where I am receiving information from a loved one, and they're in spirit, and they're validating their existence after their death, and then they are sharing information with me that absolutely proves without a shadow of a doubt that I couldn't have known that they exist, and that there was other, it was so amazing to have that validation. And not only for myself, but also for my cousin. Thank you so much for watching this video. I love you guys. If you enjoyed this and you want more, please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to share. I would love to hear your personal stories about when you ever heard information that shocked you about a relative after their passing. Post it in the comment section below. Also, if you are on YouTube, please subscribe to my channel. I look forward to our next video, and I will talk to you then. Okay? Bye.